question of the night, and it's probably the only one I'm going to ask, but our branch voted to ask this question of all the candidates running for the House this year. And so, whichever one of you like to go first, would like to know from you is, do you believe that the emergency clause is overused by the Oregon legislature, and what would you do to see that the rights of the citizens are not overturned through that use that's less than what we desire?
If I can ask you a question back, just to get some background on it, what particular issue generated that question? Or was it in the last session?
In February, during the last session, approximately 70% of the bills signed by the governor contain the emergency clause, which prohibits the citizens of this state from even having the opportunity to refer to a vote of the people. That's why we asked.
Well, I think one of the reasons that I stepped up to run was because I felt like it was important for citizens to make their voices known. And I think it's important as an Oregonian to elect people that will have our best interests in mind. And I think that the emergency clause, if our legislators are not using it correctly, then you call them on it. And that's what a phone call or a letter is for. If it's Speaker Kotek, you think it isn't having the right leadership, then you call her, or you go to her office. It's as simple as a phone call, and that's what representative government is about, is holding your leaders accountable. So.
Great, thank you. So yeah, it becomes an issue about having time to come back and speak forward, right? If you bring the emergency clause, it goes into effect right then, as opposed to having the time to come back and push it out for a referendum, push it out for an initiative process. We do Happy Valley, so adopting something in a single meeting, emergency clause, come forward, public complaint. So it really is the voice of the people, as Ms. Weiner said, but it really is the second voice, right? Sometimes we put something out there and we'll adopt it at a single meeting. The state legislature will do the emergency clause, and it just became a big complaint this last year because they felt like things were being shoved down the throats. And I think that all goes back to the leadership and the power, the one-sidedness to not vet these things and then put that emergency clause in leaves you with no escape. You can never go down and do what you believe is right and have the discussion. So it comes from passing legislation without that true vetting process. So that would be where I would say in agreement that the emergency clause has to be checked, because you can do that, you can pass it through, and there's no chance to go back on it.
Okay, any questions? Yes.
For both candidates, are you for or against Measure 97?
I'm against the Measure 97. I think it is going to be a tax that is going to go on the 1,000 corporations that they say is the only tax that's going to be regressive. It is going to be passed through to everyone living in the state of Oregon. I believe Oregon has limited resources, right? We are often looking for revenue to fill maybe some contracts, past contracts, and to fund education, schools, transportation, and so forth. But we also have an expenditure problem. And I don't believe Measure 97 is going to be the answer to that. I think what's going to happen is we're trying to get businesses to the state of Oregon. We're trying to maintain businesses in the state of Oregon, and this is going to drive out those businesses. And then it's going to be regressive, and it's not going to go to education. It's not going to go to transportation. It's not going to go to seniors. It's going to go to fill the contracts that have been in place for a long time that we can't seem to manage. So I'm not for it. I'm not supporting it. I've been public and private about that.
I am neutral. As a small business owner, I understand the economics of it. As a mom of 4, I have to look kids in the face when they're not in school. I think it's very important for us to put our money where our mouth is. We've been underfunding education for 25 years, and we're falling farther and farther behind. By the same token, I'm not a big fan of tax measures on ballots because I think it doesn't allow for the dialogue and the discourse that we absolutely need to have as legislators. So I'm still weighing and doing my homework. I've heard from a variety of business interests, and I've also heard from the labor unions. And I think, you know, once you kind of peel back the truth, because I'm not a person that just takes the rhetoric, just what you hear on TV. You'll hear a lot of sexy commercials and ads, but I do my homework, and I'm still in that process. So I see both sides at this point.
Next question. Oh, come on, this camera. Sharon.
As a former teacher and parent of 4, I'm interested in what you would do to salvage our education system, considering the tax revenue that we now have.
That'll work.
Okay.
We'll let you go.
I always ask permission of the leader. I think that one of the things I've tried to do in my business is be a community partner. And I always tell the schools, you should ask me for more. I have personal expertise, I have resources in my business, and I believe that when businesses are in the community, they owe a debt to the community. And so I think places like the Grange serve an important purpose, because that's where the community comes together. I do not believe that every problem is solved with money. I just don't. I think problems are solved when, for our children, when adults come together, put their resources together. There's a good example of a school that tore out its football field and planted a garden. That to me didn't take a lot of money. That took some people putting their heads together and figuring out what the kids in the community needed. And so to me, that's how we solve our problems, is community focus. The second, I would say, is having adult conversations about what our priorities are, as I mentioned before. If we say that we want the best trained workforce, if we say we want students, more than 75% of our students graduating from high school, then we're going to have to sit down and figure out how do we get there. But that takes Democrats, that takes Republicans, that takes all different parties. Nobody cares when a kid graduates what party somebody is. They care that that kid is graduating and that kid can go on to do whatever they dream of doing. So my time's up.
Yeah, so education, we talked about that, and I think the focus is going to have to be not necessarily to the 4-year degrees that we've been doing. Students are going to school. I think the other issue is the transfer degrees, the certificate degrees, for instance, like Clackamas Community College, and having the businesses come in, and they are teaching, right? They are supplying classes. I work with a group called Greater Portland Inc., GPI, where we focus on bringing businesses to Portland, and then they work with PCC, CCC, Mountain View Community College in order to say, this is the degrees that we need to come into the workforce, and can we do it in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? And they get these degrees, and then they can go right into the workforce. And I think that that's might be what we're missing. We have our, starter income jobs, and then we have very high-paying jobs, but we don't have that middle, $35, $40 an hour, whether we have welders, whether we have machinists. That is what we're lacking in the Clackamas area, and it's been a focus for me, working with Clackamas Community College along that way. For instance, Oregon City has Benchmade knives. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Benchmade knives. Les Diasis is a friend. And, tour that, and you'll see, he's like, I just can't find the workforce to sit here and make these knives, and I can pay high-paying jobs, but I don't have the degrees because I don't have the money necessarily to buy the equipment and train people on it. That's a big disconnect. Training on a machine that costs $100,000 is hard to buy a lot of those to train some of the students. So we then say, well, how do we do that? We bring the students out into the workforce, but it's a little fearful for them. So they do simulators with the college. And so I think those are good, simulators. And we have to spend some more money doing that. But I think we're missing that for the education. K through 12 we're focusing on. But we're missing from that high school to college. What are kids going to do if they're not going to go off to a 4-year degree and be in debt? We can get them trained right here in Clackamas and in Happy Valley. So I'm excited for that.
Next question.
When you get to the legislature, I'd like to know what's the first bill you're going to focus on? What's the first thing, your first bill that you're going to write? Here's your chance. So, well, I guess what do you really want to focus on?
Well, I think, actually, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. It's kind of a funny one. I've actually been thinking about this as I've been campaigning, and this may not be something that is like, wow, thanks for changing this, but I will tell you what I've learned in this election. Based on what's the nonsense that we keep seeing at the federal level, and we say, well, I'd like to see something work in the state of Oregon. We talk to our people and turn these darn ballots over and start with your local community members. Why do we put the presidential at the top? Let's do something where we start to put our school board members, our city councilors, our mayors, flip it over, forget about the bottom of that ticket. Let's do the top of the ticket where it touches the ground. And as a mayor, I'm telling you, I was down at the League of Oregon Cities Conference with all the mayors and city councilors this weekend and listening to what's going on, and it's like, we are the ears and eyes on the ground. And then it's like, well, go talk to your legislators and make sure you tell them what your community members want. We need more mayors and city councilors starting here and then going to the legislature so we can take your message there. So while a bill of education might be, we're going to be freshman legislators, right? To go up there and think that we're just going to write these bills, probably a little naive to think that we're just going to run it. Can we have education from here and talk to our caucus leaders though and say, here's what we hear on the ground, here's what we want to bring that balance up? That would be my focus. But that little bill about flipping that over and saying, you know what, pay attention to what's happening right here at home, I think that would be kind of key.
Well, this District 51 goes out from Boring into Damascus, Happy Valley, Clackamas, East Portland. And the one thing that I keep hearing consistently is we need roads and sidewalks. Whether it doesn't matter what part that you're in, people are tired of gridlock. Whether it's on the Abernathy, if you walk for just 5 minutes on Powell, you will thank your lucky dollar you're not dead. And we have families walking on that road as if it's like a regular road, but it's a highway in the residential area. And even in Clackamas, when you're coming home, if you're going somewhere and you're coming on Sunnyside Road, my daycare commute used to be 5 minutes, now it's 15 minutes. And so finding a good transportation solution is important, I think, for the district. And it's also one of those things that benefits the entire state. So you put people to work, you build infrastructure. We haven't built infrastructure since like before I was born. And that's the legacy that I think is, that's unfair to leave to our children. We should make sure that we have transportation routes, safe routes to school, a modern infrastructure that moves goods and services around our area for businesses. Those are the things that people want. I'm not really into sexy titles. I just do my homework and get the job done. That's what I'm interested in doing, is transportation.
Next. Well, if there's not a next, I have a personal question. After seeing what the Oregon legislature has done in the last couple of sessions on gun control, where do you two stand on that issue?
Sure, so I'm for the Second Amendment. I know that Senate Bill 941 about repealing that, I think, is a focus for this community. It's been something that I would support and work on. And so Second Amendment, and I'm not for more gun control in the state of Oregon.
As a mother of four, I'm very concerned about suicide and having, for our veterans and our children, children and veterans having, or people with mental challenges having access to guns. We know that when they're not properly stored, that they're very effective in death. And I think that that's an area that we really need to address. I was talking to a constituent, and he was fired up about regulations in Happy Valley and how he couldn't get his pool approved because of the way the fencing had to be approved. And as he's listening and telling me all the details, I realized we care more about kids drowning in pools than we do about children dying from guns. That said, I grew up in a city with a lot of violence, drug violence, gun violence. And so, and it was Washington, D.C., and it had some of the strictest gun control laws in the country. So I'm not necessarily a proponent of super strict gun laws. But I think once we get down into it, dig into it, find out the why, then we can save lives. So I don't want to see another child lose their life to a gunshot, and I don't want to see another veteran lose his life or her life either.
Anyone else have another question? This has got to be a first. Well, in that case, I would like to thank Lori and Janelle